All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What we're talking about today, Samo.
Well, we're going back into Stranger Things. We got some real-time analogies. It is our Saturday. We are talking fiction and how it applies to real life. You wanted to go over some specific plot points and holes in the story, but I think we're going to have a good ending with Steve the Hare Harrington. That is, he becomes one of the favorite characters for those that haven't
Hmm.
seen it. Spoiler alerts, obviously, probably not that I'm going to say don't watch us, but watch the show first and then come back to us.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's hard to talk about a lot of this stuff without spoiling, but especially what I'd left off with last time is watching the critiques of season five in particular, and then the whole series now that it's done in general. Like I said, I didn't do a rewatch before I watched season five, and so there were a lot of things I had forgotten about.
And I had the
Um,
privilege of just basically binge watching it after season five came out because I never watched it originally.
well,
Yeah.
and the thing that annoyed me is when they, you know, I'm I write just for fun sometimes. We're giant dorks and we play Dungeons and Dragons. Um, and I have much more fun as the DM than as a player because I like creating the stories. I like, writing things out. So I do it just for fun, and I'm not a professional with hundreds of millions of dollars being thrown at me for a Netflix series. And yet even I went, well, hold on a second. Case in point, I had completely forgotten about the fact that when you first see the Upside Down in season one, they're in hazmat suits. The Upside Down
Mhm.
is toxic because it's not Earth. It is a
Mhm.
toxic environment. I had completely forgotten about that. Well, how easy would it have been to explain that away with the worlds are merging?
Mhm.
Because it's revealed in season five that the Upside Down is actually just kind of a in
In
the dungeon.
between.
It's not an upside; it's the in between. It
Yeah.
is an extra dimensional space in the parlance of the D&D dorkiness. It's an extra dimensional space that is linking two worlds. Well, as the worlds become closer, it would make sense then something is happening here. It is changing. The exposure to Earth has changed the environment. And in fact, they kind of reference it at the very beginning of season five and then just hand wave it away, which is all those spores that were released. That's the rationale by the government and the military for why they have quarantined off this giant chunk of the United States is all these spores were released. We don't know what the effect of that is. We have to quarantine all these people until we figure out, so we make sure it's safe. Well, then they never come back to it.
Hmm.
How easy would it have been somewhere along the way for Linda Hamilton's character to say, the environment here is changing and we don't know why and we need to figure it out? That easy, that simple. 10 seconds of dialogue and you have covered this plot point. And it
Well, and
actually
and
is
also
kind of a major thing.
it would have helped with character development on her part because what we've harped on before in just real life conversations is every bad guy thinks they're the good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have fleshed out that with the Linda Hamilton character of she thinks she's doing the good, which they try to do a little bit, but it's not very convincing. They just try to make her a really bad person.
They start that, they tease that when you first see her, and she is chastising those, whatever they're supposed to be, special operations type people, the
Hmm.
of the longer it takes you to find 11, the more people are going to die. So they tease that she's like, you know she's a hard ass, but she's at least thinking of the big picture and is at least thinking in the terms of, the trolley problem. Basically, is kind of what they're teasing. I felt like with that line of, okay, you won't necessarily agree with her methods, but at least she thinks she's doing the right thing. But then
Hmm.
by the end of the season, she's a cartoon villain. something I just reminded me of when you said that is the movie Outbreak. I loved 80% of that movie. And then they just killed it at the end by turning Donald Sutherland into a cartoon villain,
Hmm.
into this caricature of the military villain that Hollywood so often likes to do. Um, and you brought up the before we started recording of another inconsistency we'll talk about with the Demigorgons is you can take it out with a baseball bat and a flamethrower, but a 50 cal does nothing because there's no consistency there. And we've had him on, the affable gentleman, our friend Chuck. I don't remember how this came up, but when he was still in the army, I had written him or asked him of what he thought about the portrayals of Hollywood, and he made the comment of, you know, we're always incompetent and the villain. I wish they would just pick one. And that I was like, well, that's dark and hilarious, but I see where you're coming from. Is can you
Hmm.
just pick one? Can I, if you're going to make me the villain, can I at least be a competent villain? If I'm going to be incompetent, can I at least be trying to do good? Hey, well, that makes sense. And that's what they are. That's what the military here becomes is they're both
Hmm.
incompetent and the villains.
Well, and helpless. It's we understand the Frodo's journey arc, right? The
Hmm.
kids are going to save the day. We get that. But when you start making it to where nobody can do right and the kids still save the day, it becomes just, I mean, it's hard to say for a sci-fi show, but it becomes unbelievable.
Yes.
We always praise the movie Alien. The way she defeats the alien is believable, even though it's this fantastic situation that doesn't exist in real life.
And that's a great setup for what I was going to say about the kids being the heroes is one of the reasons she's able to defeat the alien and then the aliens in the sequel is because she knows more. Because she's the last one standing, she has the benefit of what did and didn't work.
Hmm.
So it
It's
it
it's
would have
it's
been
the, it's the who was the first person to try the mushroom? We don't know because they're probably not alive, you know.
exactly. But and then the second person went on a wild trip and I'm like, oh, that's good. Anyway, but it would have been much more believable that the kids are the ones who are saving the day if again back to is the military evil or incompetent, there is something to and a long standing tradition of compartmentalization of information is a problem. So if if they don't know, it's like Hopper in season 4. He knew what was coming. And so that's why he had like pilfered that bottle of alcohol so he could have some fire
Hmm.
because he had seen one before. Everybody else got just slaughtered because here's this creature out of nightmare, out of story, but Hopper had seen it before. He had dealt with them before. Well, the kids have been dealing with this with the upside down, with the demigorgons, with Vecna for several years now.
Well,
They know more than the average military guy who's probably being compartmentalized, and he has no idea why he's here for real. All he knows is I have to guard this town of civilians. Why? What am I doing here? If they would have taken just a little bit more time, and again, like the line of, the spores are suddenly no longer a problem, it wouldn't have taken that much to help close that plot hole. Likewise, it wouldn't have taken very much of two bored enlisted guys sitting around going, what the hell are we even doing here? And make it clear that they don't know that there's actually a danger here.
And what they kind of started to do in season one, but they never fleshed it out fully, was this idea that this always existed and and because it always existed, this connection between the worlds and this thing that could happen, that the fantastical stories we tell via Dungeons and Dragons and fiction, Lord of the Rings or whatever, actually have some factual basis, and we've ignored that because it's fiction.
Mm.
And that was actually kind of a theme because remember their game paralleled what was happening in real life. And so that was kind of the idea that was trying to be surfaced up.
It's why the monsters end up with names from D&D monsters.
Mind flayers, demigorgons, and of course, demo dogs was its own thing. But it's yeah, it was the idea that there was always this connection, and maybe our ancestors actually experienced the same thing. And because we have these stories, oh, maybe I can treat this the same way, and these military people aren't figuring that out. And that would have been the bridge that they, like you said, more knowledge, but knowledge through thinking outside of the box, which is something that I've said about Wheel of Time. There's a reason the main characters started young because they're
Yeah.
not set in their ways. And we talk about Martha Beck's work and Ian McGilchrist. McGilchrist being one of my favorite authors of actually the more we get set in our ways, the less accurate we become in the world.
Well, and there's a great example of that with this interesting parallel between the youngest and the oldest, more or less, of the Aes Sedai of Egwene and I just brain farted on her name. Help me out here.
uh Describe her. There's a lot of people that could be
The
Katsuin,
cat the old yeah,
Elida.
cats with the
Okay,
old
okay.
green, the old green who's so atypical. She's iconoclastic. And why? Because she has been out of the tower for decades, maybe a century. It's kind of fuzzy, but she seems to have been retired for a very long time. And it's hinted at that even when she wasn't, she didn't spend a lot of time in the tower.
I think she alluded to the fact that she was around during Tom's nephew's stilling or gentling, I guess. So that would put it at like 30 years,
She came out of retirement, I think, for the Aiel War. And that's
which
how
was
she
20
knew,
years. Yeah.
and that's how she knew about the unpleasantness, as she
hmm
says it. And we know what that is because we've read New Spring, but nobody else knows what the heck she's talking about.
hmm
Um, so, but it's hinted that much like Moraine, um, she's not in the tower very much, even when she was active. She's out doing stuff. So she doesn't get constrained by that rigid mental thinking of the White Tower of
hmm
this is the way we do things, so this is the way it's done. Well,
Yeah.
no,
Well,
it's
and
just the way you do it.
it's the root of hubris is thinking you know the answer. And as we see with the Dunning-Kruger effect, the more certain you are of knowing the answer, the less right you are.
Well, and that's why the villain of the first season, um I'm brain farting on the character's name. I can only remember the actor's name. Modine. What was the name of the
Oh,
character?
she
Oh,
called him
just calls him
Papa.
father, Papa.
Papa,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's why he's such a good villain, because he is what I was hoping Linda Hamilton was going to be in season 5 is um Papa is doing this for the greater good, but like he needs Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park there. You were so busy wondering if you could do it, you didn't think about if you
Well,
should do it.
he does have it because the psychiatrist becomes that character because he's following the same party line until he
Mm-hmm.
realizes, oh, maybe I'm the baddie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then he eventually does have an arc, but so something interesting, and I'm trying to remember, I'm drawing a blank on who. I think it may have been Little Platoon did a really long video critique of the last awful Jurassic World movie, and he pulled in a lot of the stuff from the book, which is much more interesting. So there's a lot more depth there because one of Crichton's points that he tried to make in his sci-fi, and the reason his sci-fi was always like grounded in reality is, and you do see this somewhat in the movie, in the first movie, these people aren't idiots. These are very intelligent people, but they don't know what they don't know, and they aren't constrained by that unknown. And that's essentially Crichton's point is, hold on a second, you don't have things under control. You just think you're under control. And then the Goldblum character is the one who's making that point of this is the illusion of control. You're not actually in control.
Well, and what actually blows the control away isn't necessarily the fences and the electric wires and the security. It's human nature because the one guy is a double agent,
Mm-hmm.
and in trying to just try to get ahead, he ends up messing everything up. And he thinks he's going to get away with it. He thinks he's going to get out of there with nothing happening. They think they can control these things. But when you put it all together, there's what we call we always talk about the known unknowns. You should know that there are things you don't know, and that's what helps you protect yourself. Well, he was an unknown, and they acted like they knew everything. But oh, somebody's gonna try to sell our technology. That should have been a known unknown. We don't know who it is. We don't know, but we know that thing's gonna probably happen at some point, and we need to have something to account for that.
So you brought up something else we wanted to talk about a little bit more of one of the failings of the show at the end, which I referenced was the suddenly bullets do nothing to the Demogorgons.
Hmm.
And in the first season, this is why I'm really curious about the production and the behind the scenes of what in the world happened here because it was pretty clear in the first season that they had a solid idea of what the rules were for this world. And this is something that Sanderson talks about and Jordan talked about a lot is, yeah, I know how the magic system works. I've
Hmm.
written it down. And so if I come up with something new, then I know it has to fit within these parameters, right? So if I want to try if I want to try and use a weave in a new way, okay, well, I can do that, but only if it works, here or here, so long as it doesn't
Hmm.
cross these lines.
Which I do think there were some inconsistencies there. If I was to nitpick at the Wheel of Time, and my first example would be the abilities of the Murdral. Sometimes they were like even the best warder couldn't handle them, and sometimes some random farmer could if he just willed it.
Mhm.
There was a little bit there, and the weaves and the world of dreams and the mechanics of that. The whole everybody loves this scene, and it's actually one of my least favorite is the Perrin. It's just a weave. It's like, okay, well, yeah, so he's learning the world of dreams, and obviously there are different mechanics there than weaving the power in real life, but we do see a consistency where the power is actually universal on both sides. And they just want they wanted a cool scene. I don't know who wrote that scene, and everybody loves that scene, but to me it was inconsistent because Balefire is not just a weave.
That
Balefire unravels the weave.
that that would have been RJ because I'm almost positive that scene was in Knife of Dreams, wasn't it?
Yeah, so if I was to nitpick, it would be that inconsistency. And so when we go back to Stranger Things, the inconsistency in the power of the villain I mean, even when Will is battling Vecna in the end, Vecna is inconsistent in his power throughout the whole thing. In the first series, in the first part of the series, he's kind of behind the scenes, but he's
Hmm.
the one that captures Will, which you that's revealed later. He's very vulnerable there. And all of a sudden he's just this all-powerful thing with like you've shared that meme. And then something happens and poof, we're here. And so it was, well, he should have been that way the whole time because he was that way before he went there when he killed everybody but eight. Because why was eight not there? But there's another plot hole. But
I hadn't even thought about that. Of yeah, how did she get away? Did they reference that
nope.
in that second, and I missed it, or what? Because like,
Nope, she's in the
how did you
rainbow
get away?
room and somehow Elle knows
She's
she's
gone.
alive. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah. Okay, well, there's another one I had completely forgotten about.
But she needed
But
to be there in the end, so you think that she's manipulating Hopper, but it's not her manipulating Hopper. It's actually, and then she needs to be there, so you still wonder if Elle's alive. So
which is what
that's
I
her
was,
whole point in the whole thing is to make these things
yeah,
happen, and that's why I can't stand that whole part of the story.
which is what I was getting at with my curiosity of what happened behind the scenes and the writing process and the creative process, because it certainly seems like the foundation is there for these things, but then it seems like they got to a point of, well, we need this to happen, so let's do it this way. And they didn't care about the why. They didn't care about the internal logic of it. Because, for instance, um, one of the gripes about the finale is, where the heck are all the demo everythings? When they're fighting the giant kaiju hive mind,
Hmm.
there's no demogorgons, there's no demibats, there's no demi-dogs. Um, even when they're running around in the upside down, they only encounter a few demigorgons at all. And Hopper references it at the beginning, so I assumed there was going to be a reason for it. Because in that first episode, when he's about to go on his first dungeon crawl, or the first one we see, but then we find out he's been on like 30 of these, and he says, I haven't seen anything but soldiers. There's nothing there, right? There is nothing in the upside down, which is weird. And you expect that they're going to explain that. Well, an easy explanation for it would be that Vecna and the hive mind are having to put all of their energy into merging the worlds, because all the Dima everythings are controlled by a hive mind. Well, if the hive mind is focused so intently on this, it can't control its minions.
Hmm.
Easy explanation. How hard would that have been? But it seems to me that they were more concerned about having the scenes and doing the things rather than constructing a logical flow of a story.
Hmm. Yeah. And I was looking for it as I was telling you before we came on. I had come across something and it was a writer giving advice, and someone had asked, "How do you plot a story?" And this writer it said he, but it looked like a she, so it might be a they. Said something to the extent of write everything that happens and then put it all together. And that's horrible advice because this is what we had here. Everything that happens and then put it all together. Who knows? With film, you have another added layer of editing because they have to
Mm-hmm.
shoot the scenes and then they take scenes out and they put scenes in, and it's not always done in order. But yeah, it was that's what that ended up feeling like in the end. Whereas the first season felt like a very coherent story.
Yeah, that's the it's like Game of Thrones. It's like what happened to Game of Thrones when they ran out of source material. It's almost like they had source material and then they ran out.
Hmm.
And and how does that even happen
Well,
with something like this? I
did you
don't know.
miss the D&D faux pas that they didn't stick to the source material? What did they start to call L?
No, I missed this.
Sorcerer. She's our sorcerer. Sorcerer wasn't in Dungeons and Dragons till after year 2000. It
Oh,
wasn't a
that's a good point.
class, but they were treating it like a class that she was the sorcerer of the group.
I thought that's what they called Will.
Will was the wizard.
Well, Will was the wizard in the game, but then when he started to get his gay powers, I thought they were calling him a sorcerer because he just did it. It was
Yeah,
innate.
maybe. Well, I thought they called Elle that because she just had innate powers too. But either way, they were using sorcerer as a class, and it was not consistent with 1980s Dungeons and Dragons. I remember the blue box, the red box, and the green box.
Unless it was in one of those supplemental things
I
that,
looked it up. I wanted to
okay,
check my work. It was not a class until
well, you your nerd card has been revoked, guys. Yeah, your nerd card has been revoked. Um,
Well,
were
as
there
I said about the Dungeons and Dragons games, I bet you somebody knew what they were doing, but someone came in, a showrunner came in and said, "No, we need it to be more exciting. We need it to do this. We need this. We need this wording." that kind of stuff. So somebody, I really think I think the original directors, I think they really had a love for that nostalgia of those old days. But
Clearly, yeah.
some showrunner came in and said, well, this will sell better.
Yeah, that or how much was after they I don't know if they've been offered or given or working on any other projects after Stranger Things hit it big, so I don't know if their attention was divided. Um I also wonder uh how much of it was bubble.
Mm.
Like so for instance, I haven't watched it, but I've heard people talking and complaining about season 1 versus season 2 of Squid Game.
I haven't
And
seen season two. I've watched season one, so I can comment on that. But
but I have heard people complain that season 2 seems much more like it was influenced by executive decisions.
mm,
Which wouldn't surprise me because from what I know about the original season was done. This guy had
mm,
been working on it for years. This was his baby. This was his opus. He had been working with it, tinkering with it, editing it as he was trying to sell it. And and poor guy. Good for him that he got paid that there was a season 2, even if it wasn't good, because apparently he got lowballed hard because Netflix was his last resort. Is that he
mm.
couldn't find anyone to buy this, and finally he got Netflix to buy it, and
Which is unfortunate because it really was a good show, I thought.
he uh,
I thought
from
it was one of those that I was afraid to watch because of the
mm-hmm,
hype.
mm-hmm.
And then I watched it, I was like, hey, that was worth the hype.
And then from the people who liked season 1, like Critical Drinker and some other people that I watched, and one of their first criticisms of season 2 was, why is there even a season 2? Because apparently season 1 doesn't really lend itself to a sequel.
No, no, it had very much closure.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the definition of over.
So season 2 comes in, and the way they viewed it is, this isn't as cohesive. It's not as tight structurally. And the supposition is, because this is something Netflix wanted. So Netflix said, we want this, and oh, we want you to put these things. Make sure you include, make sure you check these boxes. Make sure, as we've talked about previously with Damon and Affleck talking about how, when it comes to like an action movie, you know, in the first 3 to 5 minutes, you have to have your first action set piece, which, makes no sense. I mean, unless you want something hollow, which is, they don't care. They just want content, you know? So I wonder how much of the subsequent seasons were, okay, well, now that we're green lighting, now that we're putting all this money into it, now we need more say. And so now we need you to do it this way. Or these guys just get sucked into this incredibly opaque bubble of Hollywood, and they don't even realize what they're doing
Hmm.
because that's just the world they live in. It's how often do you see celebrities just aghast that, oh my gosh, there are people who think, insert insert political topic here, and they're just astounded that anyone would think differently than they do. Yeah, it's a big country. There are 300 million of us out here. Is Yeah, we think different. That's how life works.
Hmm.
But you wouldn't know that because your bubble is so freaking opaque.
Yeah, that's the well, why would anybody do that? Well, you wouldn't do that.
And it's so frustrating because as we kind of touched on last time with Nancy, she goes through an interesting arc of sweet innocent girl to having to literally fight for her life. And then they go overboard with it by turning her into Nancy
Hmm.
Rambo, right? They go way overboard with it by the end, whereas in the first season for sure, but really for the first several, you really had good gender dynamics there. They needed each other. They were different, they thought different, they worked different, and they needed each other.
Hmm.
And I think a great example of that is Steve the Hare.
I was going to say this might be that segue we needed
Yeah.
because I brought up a scene that you didn't remember.
Hmm.
And so one of the complaints with Nambo is they make her into female Rambo, but in the process they emasculate Jonathan.
Hmm. Big time.
And this is the urge these modern writers cannot resist. We as men do have no problem with strong female characters. Just quit emasculating the male characters in the process. Why can't we all be strong? Why can't the heroes all be heroes? And and so that's what happened there. But in season one, Steve Harrington grew up because Jonathan kicked his ass.
Hmm.
Because people forget about that scene. He's the bully. Remember, everybody hates Steve Harrington because he's the typical bully. And you're like, Nancy, why are you with him? Don't let this narcissist control you. Everybody feels bad for her because of the way he is. And then he's picking on Jonathan and he hits that nerve because Jonathan's going through a lot with his brother being missing and his mom going crazy and all of the things that are happening and just being awkward to begin with.
Hmm.
And Jonathan just had enough and punches him in the face and kicks his ass, which is what we need on the internet these days. We need the threat of that happening because that's what happened in the 80s when the bully would finally push the lever too far with the kid they were bullying and the bully got beat up.
How
And guess what
often when
happened to
we're
that character? He
how
grew up.
often when we're talking, politics or personalities and celebrities, does one of us say, "There's someone who's never been punched in the face and it shows,"
And so that happened in season one. Had the writers from season four and five wrote that scene, Nancy would have came in and defended Jonathan.
or Nancy would have been the one to yeah, yeah, Nancy would have been the one to kick his ass.
Hmm.
And it's no, that's something that is the natural instinct of the masculine and something that in that moment was necessary.
Well,
It was necessary for both of them.
and some of us have very long fuses. I have a very long fuse. You can say a lot to me before I might get angry, but before I actually physically react on that anger. You can say a lot. But those of us that have very long fuses, when that fuse reaches the dynamite, there's a lot of C4 in there.
Hmm.
And that's what we saw in that scene, and that made another scene later extremely impactful because Nancy and Jonathan, again, spoiler alerts, if you're watching this far, you watch the series, but they're gonna trap the Demigorgon, and they've had this plan, and it was great. This was well written because all plans are great until you get punched in the face, and their plan looked great, and the Demogorgon just kind of like shit on the plan.
Hmm.
And one of the random events was Steve wanted to make up to Nancy, and he wanted to actually, he wanted to make up to Jonathan. He wanted to apologize to him, I think.
I can't remember which, but yeah, he
Or
he
yeah, yeah,
shows he shows up because he has been humbled and he has enough character to recognize that, and so he's showing up to make amends.
yeah. And so he shows up in the middle of their plan, and then of course he's exposed to supernatural things which he was not privy to up until that moment.
Hmm.
And he goes out, and this is one of the one areas that they actually got me. I thought something different was going to happen here. I thought he was going to be the typical horror victim because he's the guy nobody likes. He's the
Hmm.
douchebag. He was out in his car. I thought the Demogorgon was going to get him next.
Yeah, yep. Freddie and Jason get
Mhm.
the preppy d bag pretty quick,
Yeah.
usually,
And
is
so that's what
in
I
the
thought was
80s
going to
horror
happen.
movies.
But
Yeah.
he comes back in and saves the day because their plan blew up because the Demogorgon was smarter than they thought.
Hmm.
And he comes in and saves the day, which we'll get back. We won't go into the inconsistency of him being able to hurt this thing with a baseball bat when 50 cals don't, but he comes in, saves the day. They end up burning this thing to death. And that was a good arc because then he becomes later on a lot of people's favorite character because of very actual patriarchal paternal role where he
Yeah.
becomes the babysitter of the kids. He makes friends with Henderson is the first thing, and then he ends up he keeps it's like we talk Wheel of Time. He's the Matt of the series at that point because he's like, why do I always end up being the babysitter? Why do I always end up in this role? Why? And when you're like originally you're like you're the douchebag, but you're also the one that will run into the burning building
Yeah.
and save everyone because he saw the Demogorgon before he went out to this car. He could have left.
Hmm.
He could have left, but then he comes back in with just a baseball bat to save the day.
It really, uh, Steve, for me, is what saves season three because season three is
He's
pretty
dumb.
cheesy. Um, but
Yeah,
the relationship that develops there
with Robin. Yeah,
with Robin and with why do I
Henderson.
keep Henderson, the relationship that develops there and then how that grows all of those characters, Henderson and Steve especially, that redeems that season for me because it's so that arc is so good.
It was the only good part of season two was them becoming friends, and then it ends with him taking the hair advice with the Farrah Fawcett hairspray. And this was something that I thought was the biggest ball dropped. The Farrah Fawcett hairspray used as a flamethrower to save the day on one of the occasions would have been freaking
Oh,
awesome.
that would have made perfect sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Though
Well,
every young, okay, so moms, close your ears for a second. Every young boy has used a hairspray can and a lighter to make a flamethrower at some point.
I will neither confirm nor deny.
Are you even a boy if you've never done that?
Also lighter,
At least an 80s 90s boy. Yeah.
also lighter fluid. Yeah.
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 We
Squirt
made we did lots of
dumb
fun
things.
things. Yeah.
Dumb, fun, but dumb. Yeah.
Especially when we were around the affable gentleman.
Well, and that's again how you rationalize how these kids can deal with these, you know, existential, extra dimensional monsters, literal monsters, is because this is the kind of stuff 80s kids did.
Hmm.
Is
Well,
this
yeah.
craziness?
And they actually had a theme with these demogorgons. They were very plant-like in their demeanor, in their look, and actually how they functioned. You could see the
Hmm.
vines coming out and everything. Shoot a tree, burn a tree, which is going to be more effective?
Hmm.
And they could have gone with that. They could have used that arc and been like, "Hey, Hopper, that gun's not so great. Shoot that tree." And then put a lighter up against it and see which did more damage.
So,
And
one of my last thoughts on Steve, and as an example for what happened to this show, is maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I feel like at
we're
the
reading
very
way too much into everything,
well,
so
that's true,
that's the whole point of this
but
show.
I feel like in the epilogue there, Steve ends up with the best life, but in the context of the show, I feel like he's the butt of the joke
Hmm.
because he wants a girl, he wants to stay in Hawkins, he wants to settle down, he wants to have four, no, six kids. And they're all laughing at him. Jonathan isn't just a filmmaker, he's an auteur. Nancy is out there,
Hmm.
conquering the world as little Miss investigative journalist. I don't even remember what Robin's doing. I don't even know why she's there. But but
She was there to help bring Steve around, and no, she was the radio host. That's what she was doing.
no, I mean at the end, at the very
Oh,
end, at the epilogue, as they're all sitting on top of the radio station,
hmm.
having a beer, reminiscing, saying, "Hey, we need to stay in touch. We're all spreading out. We need to stay in touch." But Steve ends up, as teacher and coach, and just, you know,
He's the everyman.
he ends up, he starts off as the preppy douchebag and ends up as the everyman who actually cares. And
Well,
yet I
and
feel like he's the butt of the joke there.
he kind of is, but at the same time, it was a self-own by the writers. They try to make him the butt of the joke, but listen to the manosphere. That is what real men want. They want the
Yeah.
kids. They want the life
Mhm.
like that. They want the stability. And he represented that, and they're trying to make a joke out of it, but you and I are watching it going, huh, I like Steve. And
It's
even
it's
and even all the ladies that are watching it, like, okay, so one of my friends, she just started watching it because we were talking about it, and we tried not to give spoilers, and she's like, okay, I'll watch it. First season, she's like, I hate Steve. I hate Steve. I hate Steve. I hate Steve. By the middle of season two and then into three, she's like, I like Steve. And she
Exactly.
can't even tell you exactly when that started to happen. She was just like,
Yeah.
I like Steve. And it is the biggest self-own in writing if they didn't do it on purpose. If they were trying to make him the joke, then they not only did they fail, but it backfired because he's the most one of the most popular characters. And he's the most popular character because he represents what so many people out of the 330 million in the United States, plus whatever international audiences this is getting to, say, yeah, I actually kind of want that. I understand this guy. I understand this guy. You know what? He was trying to be a braggart and a show off when he was a
Mm-hmm.
young man because
Mm-hmm.
we understand that. You want to stand out. You want to be popular with the girls. You want to get the girl. You want all of
He's
those things.
trying.
And you're very naive about how to do it.
He wants to be a man, but he's not a man yet. He's just a boy who can shave.
And he thought he was, and then he got
Mm-hmm.
humbled.
Mm-hmm.
And then he made the hero's journey and he saved the day. And then he said, you know what? This is what I want my life to be, taking care of people. And then he says it out loud. And he says, you know what, Nancy, I guess this is why we didn't work out because I actually wanted 6 kids. I want to be that guy, And she's like, oh my gosh, that's horrible, as most modern women would say now. And
Yeah,
he,
well, exactly. That's the kind of laughing criticism I heard from a lot of people was, you know, only one out of the four people on the top of that roof in that epilogue are going to end up with a happy life. The
yeah,
others are going to be alone and unhappy.
yep. And
They
and
they
and
they
even what
think they
brought on
have
that
what they want
speech,
now, but not now. Yeah.
what brought on that speech was a ridiculous situation where they stole the RV. And he's driving this thing going, I always kind of thought about driving one of these things with my family. And it was a very organic moment. And he's like, this ridiculous situation ended up being an organic moment where you kind of like, wow, dude, you're not the jerk you were, 10 episodes ago.
It's a great illustration of something Jordan Peterson talks about a lot and gets a lot of heat for, because he's right and people hate that. That the reason young women, girls and young women, fall for Steve the hair preppy D bag is because narcissism, which he is then until he gets
Hmm.
humbled and goes on his arc, narcissism looks like competence.
Hmm.
That is the whole point of the narcissist is he is feigning competence. And until you have wisdom, it's hard to tell the difference.
Hmm.
And women are naturally attracted to competence. Well, if you think this person is competent because you don't have a lot of experience, but actually he's just, spinning a web of lies, you don't realize it until it's too late.
Well, and this goes back to our most recent discussion, difference between men and women. He had a bunch of false positives.
Mm.
And it took a very obvious negative for him to grow up. Had he continued to have false positives, he would have been the guy who ends up an insurance salesman and the complaining, talking about his high school days, you know.
And
And
instead, not only does he have the enough inner character to realize to have a humility after he's been humbled, but then he also recognizes, you know what? This is what real happiness is these connections I am making with these people who I used to look down on. But then more than just the connection, to your point, is that big brother or fatherly mentoring that he does to
mhm.
these younger kids, and that gives him fulfillment.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the best scenes in the entire series was actually in season three when Henderson comes back from camp and they reunite. And that's when Robin has her little quip of, "Are all your friends kids?" But he's, it's the very genuine scene where he's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're back," and they're just trying to catch up, and it was a very believable and well acted scene that a
Mhm.
lot of people just like pass on because it wasn't a monster fighting the the kids or the gay magic powers coming out or something. It was just two guys like, I haven't seen you in forever. Yeah. Wow, rock on, I think that's why Eddie is one of the best characters because he just trying to like live. And you understand he's in that trailer park and Max, that's why you identify with her if you were ever a poor kid. You're trying to oh my gosh, yeah, this is what a trailer park in the 80s looked like if you've ever grown up in one. And now his story was kind of predictable. You knew he was going to die and exactly how he was going to die from the very beginning, but it was other
Well,
than
I'll throw this out there. I had a thought as we were talking about Steve, and another criticism that the last season that I saw is they were too afraid to kill anyone. A lot of people die through the series,
mhm.
including some important people, uh, or people you think are going to be important,
Yeah,
like
and this is the thing that I'd never understood about anybody watching this. Elle's not a good person. She kills a lot of people
because
that
she
were
doesn't know
just
how to be. Yeah, that's
yeah,
what Hopper's trying to teach her.
she kills a lot of people early on that are like, wow, that person was just doing their job.
Yeah,
And
that
it's
that
not
is
not in the Nazi soldier way, in
mhm,
in a wow, I just showed up to work today. And
exactly right. So, um, if I had been in the writer's room for season five, we may talk about this more later because I want to wrap it up here. But
yeah, we are going a little long. So.
Jonathan and Nancy's scene, I thought, much like how I thought,
The one with the
um,
weird goo that never gets explained?
yep, yep, exactly.
Okay.
I actually thought that was going to go somewhere different and be better, and instead it just ended up with them breaking up, which was really freaking disappointing
Well,
after
not
five
only
seasons of
not
this.
only ended up with them breaking up, but in the way that was completely always emasculating Jonathan
Exactly,
the whole time. And it
exactly.
was like, why can't they have an equal breakup? Why can't this be?
I would have pushed if I was in that writer's room for season five. I would have pushed for Steve to die at the end, for him to be the major character that dies, because
Mm,
it would make sense. It would make perfect sense that he would sacrifice himself for the others, because that's the guy he became. And that his death, his sacrifice brings Jonathan and Nancy closer together,
mm,
because that loss makes them realize how much they need each other. Because to me, that is one of the many reasons that scene is so infuriating is all the things they're going through is supposed to be reinforcing how much they need each other.
hmm
I mean, that is again why I ranted about Will's coming out scene is it should have been bigger than just I have the gay and it gives me magic powers. It should have been no, we need to come together. We need to be open with each other. We need to be honest with ourselves and with each other
hmm
because so much of this story is about that is it's friendship. At its most basic level, this is a story about friendship.
Yeah, and in context, in the 80s, that would have been a big deal. That would have been a big deal between a group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
But the way they did it was so clumsy that it was like, yeah, it just didn't even mean anything except, oh my God, all of a sudden he has powers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, we may rant about that more later, or maybe I'll bring that into what we talk about Wednesday, which is what I think Steve's arc segues into. Is
I mean, was
is
that another self-own where the guy who was coming out of the closet was also infected with this dark evil?
he got graped by a literal demon,
Hmm
and then he gets
And
the
then he had
gay.
something in his body that he couldn't get rid of. And
Does he need to go to conversion therapy? I'm sorry. No, just edit that out.
that was an HIV reference from me, but I don't know where you're going with that.
I wasn't gonna say it, but that was my thought when you see Will's epilogue is Well, it's
Again,
the
again, if you were in the 80s, you would know.
it's the late 80s, early 90s. When did
Mm.
Philadelphia come out? Like,
Oh gosh.
you know, so it's like, that's where he's going to end up. Anyway, um, but we're we're
Dude,
gonna
that is okay. So anybody in the audience, if you listen this far, you know better, but it's not our opinion. We're just joking around.
we have
Called
pretty
shock
dark sense.
comedy.
We
Yeah.
have pretty dark senses of humor. That's why, Norm Macdonald makes me laugh. Um,
And we like
but
Ari Mati and
exactly, exactly. Um, uh, we're going to talk next time more about where we left off last Wednesday when we were talking relationships, and specifically, I had ended asking the question of how do you stand up to, say no to, disagree with a modern young woman without it immediately triggering her and turning into a fight, or
yeah.
getting ghosted or getting whatever,
Well, and
you
I
know.
would love to include in that conversation how, I mean, and we're going to speak as heterosexual couples in this. How do you make someone of the opposite sex comfortable in a relationship?
Mm,
Because just as a teaser for that, and just to put it in a couple sentences real quick, the as a man, the female reaction to questioning them makes it worse. Because if you're talking trust, and everybody likes to throw out the word narcissism, one of the biggest narcissistic red flags is someone who doesn't take accountability and who gets offended when they're questioned
mm.
versus actually answering the question.
And yeah,
And
and what
that is a very feminine trait because it's the how dare you.
exactly.
And
And
as a man, we have in the cross-sex mind reading in our nature is every guy is out to get you as a female. I have to go get a female if I'm going to do wrong. And that's a fact.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we may overlap even more because something I thought of when we were talking about this is it the beginning of season 2 or the beginning of season 3 where Nancy and Jonathan are working at the paper?
That's season 3 because that's when everybody gets possessed.
Okay.
And remember, the
Because
head of the paper is the one
yeah,
is the
that's
one
right.
who does
That's right. That's
possession.
right. Okay. So there is some interesting dynamics there. And again, this is why stories matter because
Hmm.
they can teach us, they can work as analogies, is
Well, and that was a
they
message that
butt
is actually not a
heads
horrible,
together.
yeah, that's not an actual horrible message that they were sending of the workplace for females in the 80s. I mean, again, things were different back then. It
Hmm.
was a lot harsher place for
But
that. But they were
sp-
so over the top with it,
uh-huh.
it made it not it made even someone who understands it go, God, why are you throwing this in my face the whole time?
But
But no,
more
the fight her and
specifically,
Jonathan have.
yes, that's what I was thinking
Yeah,
of.
yeah. And that is the thing that is one of my biggest complaints too, because he was absolutely right. And you can watch it, and the only way you don't think he was absolutely right is if you think the woman is always right.
Exactly.
And it's one of the worst things I always hate at a wedding when they do the who's been married the longest dance. And they always say, how have y'all stayed together so long? And the guy always says, because she's always right. And I'm like, that answer is the worst answer in the entire world. It's the worst relationship advice ever because
Hmm.
eventually she will not respect you as a
Hmm.
man.
Dang straight. Yep. All right. Well, we will rant about that on Wednesday, and then we will make Super Bowl predictions that will almost certainly be wrong,
Seattle's going to win.
and we will see y'all next time.
I'm just going to put that out in the ether as I'm not even going to change my opinion
I
about it.
don't even
And
care. All I care about is that I checked the forecast before we started, and the it looks sunny and 60s in Galveston, so should be good fishing that weekend.
oh, that'll be great. I mean, maybe we'll catch something we can cook because Seattle's in the both of the teams have seafood as themes. So,
There we go.
all right, later guys and gals.